necessarily. I'm just trying to get to something that is personally meaningful. And I find that, if you get to a place with your art practice where it's like, it really speaks to you and it has a potential to speak to others, it doesn't matter how many other people are out there creating art, because if it's something sincere and powerful, it will always have its place.
Welcome to the Flying Fruit Bowl, a platform dedicated to the discussion and exploration of art and the creative process. I'm your host, Aaron S., and today is part 2 of our conversation with the incredible Crystel Pereira. In 2022, Crystel also had her first solo show at Azumar Gallery in Montreal. She used this opportunity to create both 2D and 3-dimensional works, bringing the themes of the landscape into reality. I really hope you enjoy our conversation, and thank you very much for listening.
Mm-hmm.
So, continuing with your creative process, do you have any particular routines that help you focus on your art?
I should probably get better at that, but I think I just kind of get into the studio and then start doing things, but there's no like really build up to it, or there's no like routine that I do to help me kind of do it. I think the times where I have like the most ease getting into a project is when I've been thinking about it for a while and like it's already kind of at the stage where like I have sketches or I have things going on, and then like when I do get into the studio, I already have an idea of where I'm going, because otherwise just like stepping into the studio and being like, okay, I'm going to work today, like that does not work for me. I have to know where it's going, or at least like what I want to do that particular day, because otherwise it's kind of like the blank page kind of syndrome where there's like everything is possible, but what specifically are you going to do? It's hard to narrow down sometimes. Or I find it's really great to have a project that I'm already working on, and then going back into the studio and working on it is fun too. Mm-hmm.
So, how important is it for you to show or document the creative process of your work?
I would say so far it hasn't been very important, in that I don't do it, or I don't do it very well. I think I just kind of show like finished pieces, and then I throw it out there every now and then, or like I'll have a backlog of finished pieces that I have to show, and then I kind of post them and forget about it. But I want to get better at letting people see the process behind it, or like you and I have talked a lot about how it's nice to see the artist behind the work as well. And I don't think that I'm currently sharing that, or it's just always a lot like a very kind of short text accompanied by a photo, and that's it. Or I think I should get better at kind of showing more of myself in what I post on social media, and in regards to the work as well, like seeing, like explaining to people why I do this and why it's important to me. And I think if like I have a conversation one-on-one with someone, or like in an exhibition or something, I will tell people like all these things, but I don't think that anyone who follows me on Instagram gets that currently.
Have you ever done like an introduction on your Instagram being like, oh, this is me as the artist?
Nope, I've never done that. Or if I did, I've forgotten about it, so it wasn't very memorable. But
I thought if you can't remember it, how's everybody else going to remember it? That's only because I'm kind of like, because this is a thing, and actually it leads into a question I'm going to ask you in a second. But I'm very aware that like artists, actually I might as well ask you now because it leads into the conversation. But a lot of artists are introverted. They don't really want to put themselves out there. They don't want to necessarily be in the spotlight. They always want to create work behind the scenes. But
yeah,
I kind of almost feel like you don't have to have your face in the limelight, but I think it's important for people to know who you are, because I always say, this just maybe something that I picked up when I'm talking to people, but I feel like you can't expect people to invest in your work without knowing the person behind the work. And you don't have to be people's best friends. That's not their point. The point is that like you would like to kind of get an inkling of who this person is and why they're creating this work, and then why should you be interested in it? Like I don't know. It's something that I've just considered after talking to a lot of people, and some people are very kind of indecisive. Some people are like, I just like, no, I don't want to be, I don't want to show my face online, or they just like they want to remain mysterious, which is also good. But I definitely feel like in this society where there is a huge focus on being present online, that actually showing yourself and kind of being a little bit more personal, as people always say, like be personal in your stories and be professional on your feed. I think there's a room for that. I'm kind of curious, like, firstly, like, are you more introverted or extroverted? And secondly, like, is this something you want to actually work on?
Well, I definitely understand the importance of parasocial relationships and how we interact with people's arts or how we view it. And I know that there's a lot of people that I feel like I know on the internet, but that I don't actually know, but just because of how good they are at um at showing who they are through their various interactions online. Like I feel like I know them, and I like that feeling, or like I feel like it brings more to the experience of looking at their work. So yeah, I would like to work more towards that. I personally am more of a private person in my life in general. I don't think that I would seek to share as much of my life if I wasn't an artist. Like I didn't have social media before. I probably still wouldn't
Right.
have social media if I wasn't making art. So that's kind of where I'm coming from in terms of my relationship to social media. I'm getting better at it, but I still kind of feel like I just kind of show my work and I'm like hiding behind it, and which is fine too. But yeah, definitely more introverted. I love people. I love talking to people, but I have a need for a private space and
Of
for
course.
like alone time and for all of that. And I think that a lot of my work comes from having this like protected space of like where I can just be myself and do my things and then show it afterwards. So I think like a lot of things that people do now of like showing photos of their space or like time lapse videos of them actually working and everything. Like I haven't started doing that just because I have like this kind of um it's not an aversion, but just this kind of resistance to it where like I know I should be doing it and I enjoy when other people do it. So I think I would like to show that for others, but I just haven't done it yet. But like I've gotten better at it in the sense that lately, I have a website, there's my
Yeah.
biography, there are photos of me. That didn't exist a few months ago.
Yeah.
So now like there
Yeah.
is this place on the internet where you can go and see what I look like and who I am and what I'm
Yeah.
about, which didn't used to exist. So yeah, definitely like little steps, but I think I'm only going to go like about as fast as I'm comfortable doing it.
Oh,
And
of course.
mhm.
And and you're right. Like as someone who looks at a lot of artists' websites, like for me, like that's so helpful because
Mhm.
it allows me to put a face to the work. And it also
Yeah.
allows me to learn more about you. Particularly, I think artist biographies are so important. And actually, and I've said many, many times in the interviews, but like that's one of the biggest reasons why I want to interview somebody. Because if you can
Mhm.
write a good artist statement or a good biography, then I know you're going to talk about your work very well.
Mhm.
It's to me that tells me that you've considered your work and that you
Mhm.
haven't it means something, you have something to say. It's not the only criteria I use, but that's like a huge factor in terms of who I want to talk
Yeah.
to. Obviously, as well as am I interested in their work? Do they have something that I want to ask them?
Mhm.
Which is the biggest one. But it's kind
True.
of
But
it's sorry, no,
um
continue.
I was just going to say like, at the beginning of this you asked me if I thought art education was important
Yeah.
in this path, and I said not necessarily, but I think one of the things that art school will bring you is this understanding of the importance of talking about your work and describing it and being able
Yes.
to put it into words, whereas before, you're just kind of creating things and not necessarily, I say not necessarily because some people do, but like you're not necessarily thinking about how to explain it, why
Mm.
you're doing it, how to put it into words, how to like actually write about it and post it online in a way that's very like, like this is the thing that I have come to the conclusion of, or, it feels like
Yeah.
very like you're crystallizing a version of explaining your work in a text and you're putting it out there. So that's kind of a big deal if like you've never done that before. And
Yeah,
I
like
think that that confidence can come from art school, but not necessarily, or like that understanding of the importance of doing it.
so yes, because then you have an idea of what kind of questions your work is asking, you know.
Hmm.
And I think that's the thing that I think people forget is that anything you create asks some form of question, or it donates to some form kind, or it denotes to an answer to a question. Like
Hmm.
anything you create is about something, and I think you kind
Hmm.
of have to work backwards sometimes. You have to what's the term for it? Um, reverse engineer. That's it. Of
Oh
course,
yeah, reverse engineer.
yeah. Like sometimes you have to like reverse engineer while you're doing something.
Just one thing I want to say about
Yeah,
that is
yeah,
I don't know if you know the expression, the absence of a political opinion is a political opinion in and of itself. And so, even in art, if you don't necessarily think that you have something specific that you want to express through it, that's fine as well. Like that can be your position as well. Like
yeah,
if it's beauty for beauty's sake, then that's a thing
yeah.
that's
That's just as valid.
acceptable
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
Exactly. It's valid too, but you have to know that you're doing this and you have to know that you've come to this conclusion and that's why you want to do it. Like if it's just an aesthetic thing for you, then fine. But like even a purely aesthetically beautiful image can have an intention behind it or like a meaning behind it, even if it's even if you're just looking at it from like the finished product, that's a beautiful thing. But that basically, even if you do just want to make beautiful pictures, it's fine as well. But like you have to have thought it out and come to the conclusion that it's okay for you to do that, or that that's what you want to do.
Oh, absolutely. And going back to something you said earlier about kind of just like being a bit resistant to, say creating time lapse and stuff. I feel like one thing that we don't really often think about is that creating the quote unquote content to do that, like particularly reels and stuff, like it's very disruptive to your practice of you actually just sitting down and creating. Sometimes you
Hmm.
just want to sit down and create work and you don't want to have to think about, oh wait, I need to set up a camera. Oh wait, I have to make sure that, the studio looks tidy or whatever, or oh, I have
Hmm.
to document the space because you want to just create. And I think sometimes like I love seeing time lapses, I love seeing creative
Hmm.
reels, I love all that kind of stuff. It's very interesting. But I also do sometimes wonder like how much of is that like how much of that is a hindrance to an artist and their
Hmm.
actual flow of creativity, not even just the work itself.
True. And I think that'll probably depend on the individual artist as well. But like I know that for me personally, at first it would definitely be disruptive because it's not natural for me to be like,
Yeah,
let me just set up different camera angles to what I'm doing, or like think about like the angles and the lighting and all this stuff. Like I
yeah,
I just wouldn't do it. And I don't necessarily work in a very like linear way where it would make for a great time lapse. Like sometimes I paint an entire thing and then I like cover it up and then paint something else. And like I don't think that would be a very interesting time lapse, or like maybe it would, but I don't know. Like I feel like if you're painting and thinking about the fact that you're filming, you're gonna like make certain
oh,
choices that you may not make
100%,
otherwise. Hmm.
100%. Because when a camera is present, the whole atmosphere changes. When you're
That's true.
aware of a camera present, everything
Hmm.
changes. Like you're very
Yeah.
aware of how you're moving, what you're doing, how things look. And not just
Hmm.
that, like a lot of people are like, oh, let's make this aesthetically pleasing. And it's like, that's not reality. Your studio
Hmm.
isn't going to be neon pink, aesthetically pleasing,
Exactly.
velvet carpet. Why would you have velvet carpet in your studio? I
Yeah.
don't know. But, it's not going to
But
be
like that
that.
existed before Reels as well. Like like the the kind of like stereotype of women posing in front of their paintings, but who take up more space in the painting,
Yeah.
or like that existed even as like images as well. It's become more present now that like video content is
Oh,
out there.
absolutely. I actually saw a really interesting post the other day, and there was an artist in front of one of their image finished pieces.
Hmm.
Great artist, great image. But they were just like, oh, hello, everybody. By the way, this piece behind me is for sale. And I was just a bit like, so are you actually asking people, are you actually intending to say hello to people and seeing how people are? Or are you just trying to sell your work? Because
Hmm.
there's two different ways of doing that, and I kind of feel like it can be very hard because in some ways you always have to be self-promoting. But in another way, like, you also want to build a community. And it must be kind of hard to balance that between
Hmm.
that fine line between of, having an audience that are going to buy your work, but also pleasing the audience that only just watch your work.
True. And I don't think I'm very good at that, but I find that like the times where I've had the most interest towards my art is when I'm not trying to promote it. So I think there's definitely a fine line to find like, I mean, if people feel like you're trying to sell them something, they won't be interested, or they'll kind of have a resistance to it, I find. Whereas if you're just excited to share your work and show it, I think people will respond to that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think, if your intention is really just like to stage something in a way that you're trying to sell it to them, then it's probably not going to work as well.
I think there is like an 80-20 rule. So 80% of stuff you share, that's other people's stuff or other content, and 20% of it is your own. So that way you're not sharing everything of yours all the time,
Hmm.
constantly bombarding people, but you're
Hmm.
also promoting yourself as well. Because at the end of the day, you want to be paid for what you do. That's kind of why you're here. Or at
True.
least that's why most people are here. Not everybody, but it's why most people are here. And
Yeah. But I think part of like the, 80/20 thing would be showing things that are also of interest to people. Like it can be your own stuff, but if you're teaching them how to use a medium or how to use something, or
yeah,
if you're showing them like a behind the scenes kind of thing that they wouldn't otherwise see, like that can count as part of like not promoting yourself, but it's still content that you're showing.
that was it. That was very similar to what you've just said. And the idea of like,
Hmm.
how much do you try to show and support other artists as well as your own?
Mm.
That's what I wanted to
Hmm.
ask you.
Okay. Yeah. Um, I definitely should do a lot more of that because there are so many artists that I follow that I admire, or like whose work I find exceptional. But yeah, I've been basically the past last year, I've been finding it hard to just be online in general and just like
Oh
put
yeah,
in that effort to showing things online. And I think a large part of that was I had to spend so much effort on like doing all the administrative stuff to making the transition to becoming a full-time artist and all that. And
of
also
course.
just like this being so sick of being online because of the pandemic. Like in the beginning, it was just we were all online, everything was happening online, like all of the classes, the whatever workshops or like
Yeah,
anything or like
exhibitions and
seeing
stuff. Yeah,
friends, exhibitions, like everything. And it was just too much. And so I had this like adverse reaction to it where I just was unable to do it. And I just wanted to spend time like with people in the flesh and actually doing things outdoors and other things. So I used to be a lot more active in like showing other people's work and everything. And I'm going to get back more into it like after I've moved and I have more time and energy to put into all
of
that.
course.
But
Yeah,
yeah, I've been focusing on other things a lot. But yeah, I think it definitely is important. And also just to show other people that it's not a competition and
yeah.
it doesn't just have to be about like your followers only seeing your work or only seeing your stuff. And it's really not healthy to just think about it in that way, like just to see that you're part of a larger community and that you're inspired and influenced by other people's work as well.
Yeah, because I have a friend. I'm not going to mention any names, but I was talking to him a while ago about his account. He was telling me that, his reach is low. Obviously, everybody's reach is low, but he was telling me about his Instagram account saying, his reach is
Mhm,
low. He wants to get like build more of a better audience or at least kind of engage with more people. So I said to him, why don't you share other people's work? Because, that's a great way to engage with other people, with the people that, whose work you're sharing, and also other people who'll be interested in that. And,
mhm,
and they're a bit like, oh, no, I'm fine. I don't really want to do that. That's not what my account's about. And it's like,
mm,
I understand that and I respect that, but you can't just expect people to like what you're doing because you're posting online. You have to
mhm.
have kind of, you have to give back. You can't just
Yeah.
take. And I think social media, I think we have to remember that it's a give and take. You can't just expect people to like what you do and
Mhm,
take that as face value because, if, as I said in my last interview, I feel like if you have a large following or if you have any following, you have some sense of responsibility of the audience you have to kind of speak to them. Like there are certain Instagram pages that I really love, but I know they don't interact with the audience, and it's like
mhm,
you have a following and you have an audience that are able to be engaged, but you don't engage with them. Like why would you not? Because that could benefit you in the future, whether that's through monetary purposes or whether that's just creating conversation and
mhm,
building a community. It's like, I don't know. It seems to me like a lot of places, and I don't want to sound cynical, but even though I sound cynical, but it seems like a
mhm,
lot of places say they want to build community, but they don't actually ask any questions or actually have any discussions or actually try to create community. And I think
yeah, or
it's,
they don't try to engage in any way.
yeah, and I think that's kind of strange. Like I post polls and questions all the time, and yeah, people may not see them or people may not care about them, but I kind of feel like as long as I do it, it's showing to people that I actually want to know about them because I'm very
Mhm,
much interested in people. I'm very much interested in artists. Otherwise, I wouldn't be
mhm.
doing this. So I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know. It's a weird thing for me. Like social media should be social.
Mhm. No, I agree. And I think you go about it in a very good way and like in a very sane way where you're trying to connect with people and get to know
Yeah,
them and
100%.
like as you mentioned, like open questions and dialogue as well. So that's great.
Yeah, because I just feel like we all need a community. And we all need to figure out that, as you said earlier, it's not a competition. This is,
Hmm.
you need other people for support that you can rely on. So, like, say, for instance, if you're having a rough patch, or if your work's not selling very well, or if you have any questions about the wider business side of art, particularly, there are people
Hmm.
you can ask that will help you with the right intentions, from your best interest, And I
Hmm.
think it's easy to feel isolated as an artist because you're not building a community for yourself or you're not being part of a community. And actually, that
Hmm.
is a question to ask you. Like, do you feel like you are part of a wider art community?
Um, yes and no. Well, when I mentioned that during the beginning of the pandemic, I started spending more time online and starting like talking more to other artists online. A big part of that was a community called Canyo, which I
Hmm.
think you're familiar with.
I'm very familiar with, yes.
Okay. Yeah. So they were a big part of like feeling like I was part of a larger community, even if like I don't necessarily have the same interest in terms of like what I produce in terms of art as other people in Kenya necessarily. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of interest toward like portraiture and stuff
Yeah,
like not
absolutely.
exclusively, but there is a big
But yeah.
like focus on that, whereas I have no interest in that.
Uh,
But that's okay. But like I met so many great people through Kenyo, and I still speak with a lot of them. And just knowing that like wherever they are in the world, I know that these people I can write to them and ask them either
yeah,
technical questions or existential questions, or just send them a stupid meme or
yeah,
whatever. And it's really great because otherwise it can feel pretty isolated or pretty lonely. And especially when you have this like very specific interest towards something that like most of the population does not care about.
yeah.
Like even if you are a very successful painter, most of the people on the planet will not know who you are, and that's
Oh
fine.
yeah,
It's like a very like niche thing as well. But yeah, so just to know that you have other people out in the world that you can talk to who are equally interested in like having very drawn out conversations about like what kind of painting medium you're using or like why you do this or just like sending garbage to because
yeah.
they also have like that sense of humor and those affinities. That's great.
And it's also great 'cause they understand you. They understand where you're coming from,
Hmm.
and they also understand like the trials and tribulations of being an artist. Because
Hmm.
if you were to talk to your friends and family about it, they might not understand. They'll just be like, "Well, this is the life you signed up for, or whatever." When it's actually like it's much deeper than that. Like
Hmm.
particularly when it comes to like self-doubt and imposter syndrome, things that
Hmm.
everybody goes through. It's great to have people to talk to about that because otherwise it can very much ruin your career and ruin the joy of creating.
Exactly. And if you don't know that other people are experiencing those things, or if you can't ask them how they personally deal with it, then you're kind of alone with that. And,
Yeah.
it can be very alienating to just not know how to deal with that.
Absolutely. So I actually want to get into your exhibitions because I'm kind of
Hmm.
curious about kind of just like, I mean, yeah, good question, best question to ask is like, how did you get into exhibiting your work?
Hmm. Well, actually, my boyfriend really was very supportive and really encouraging, and he was the first person to really like believe in me and push me to apply to things because I was just like, well, it's not good enough. And he was like, well, you're probably never going to reach a stage where you think it's
Yeah.
good enough or finished or done. So you should just, try to put it out there and like be detached from the results of that, but just try to kind of share it anyway. And, like also sharing failure or sharing like the earlier part of your practice can be good for other people who are starting out and who don't feel like they're good enough either, but who see that there's like other people going along the same path and who are also like having those same struggles or like trying to figure out those same things with the same or with different mediums or whatever, but like we're still going through that same thing. So I think a big part of that was like having that support and that encouragement, and then just applying to things. Like I think we've had this discussion where we were like,
Yeah.
well, you won't get anything if you don't apply to it. So just send your work to people or send it to like open calls or whatever you see. And there are a lot of open calls. Well, depending on where you are in the world, but like there are others that are more like that accept international applications as well. But like I've been mostly focused on showing my work locally in Montreal where I am. Yeah, so a big part of that is just like getting over that initial fear of like I'm not good enough and like I can't send my stuff and just sending it out and knowing that like even if in 5 years' time, like my work will probably be a lot better, like more interesting than it is now. It doesn't mean that what I'm doing now can't be shown or can't be, like worthy of being shown
Yeah.
or like won't speak to someone.
Absolutely. And your solo show, like, how did that come about?
A bit of the same thing where like I saw that there was an open call for a gallery that shows a lot of emerging artists called Ossenfeld Gallery. And yeah, so I just sent my application. I had to send a portfolio, biography, artist CV, like just a complete kind of thing. And I had to describe what I wanted to show for the exhibition. So I presented the project of disturbing strangeness. So basically, I told them that I wanted to make a 3D maquette and that I wanted to do a series of paintings based on this physical thing that I was creating. And they accepted and they told me that I could show my work there, and they sent me the dates and everything. So then I had to like work towards that deadline, and the dates ended up changing a little bit. So I had a little bit less time than planned to work on the exhibition, and I was doing another project before that that ended up taking more time. So I ended up not exactly finishing everything that I wanted to do for that exhibition, but I'm still glad that I did it, and I'm still glad that I was able to show it and still like develop that concept.
See, that's amazing. I think that's even better because it's like it's an opportunity you saw and you're like, I'm gonna go for that. And I think
Hmm.
that's like the best thing. And it kind of just goes to show, like, as you said, like apply for things because you never know. it's like there's a piece of advice somebody gave me a long time ago when I very first started the 5 Fruit Bowl, like 10 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, in its very early infancy when I was at university, I interviewed a fashion designer called Rufus Dixon. And at that time, I was just doing written interviews, and I always asked every artist if they had a piece of advice for other artists. And
Hmm.
his piece of advice has always stuck with me for the last 10 years, which is funny. And his advice was always create work because you never know that the next image you create could be the thing that takes off. And as simple
Hmm.
as that is, it's so true. Same way of like
Yeah.
apply for things because you never know
Hmm.
that next application could be the thing that starts your career. Because at the
Hmm.
end of the day, you just don't know. There's times are so uncertain.
That's true. And yeah, and about like just creating work, I think that's so important because there's no, um, I think that inspiration or like whatever we call inspiration comes as you're working. So it's not something that is like a prerequisite to doing the work. It's something that happens as you're doing things. And oftentimes ideas for other paintings come as you're doing something else. Like even, if you're making something that you think is a mistake, or if you like drop something or whatever, then maybe that'll give you an idea to like work with the material a certain way for the
Yeah.
next time. Or like maybe you'll discover a color palette that you absolutely want to work with and that will become a series. Or you just never know. But like really the important thing is to just do the work, like just get in the studio and do something, even if it's stupid, and even if you are doubting yourself, like even if you just want to go through uh like creating something in order to get over an artist block, like just do exercises or just do like composition studies or just do a master copy or do whatever. But like as long as you're actually working, I think you're on the right track, instead of just like waiting for, the magical thing to strike or like magical inspiration or like for some gallery to contact you. Like just that's not going to happen that way. Or if it does, good for you, but that's not like the normal route.
So, do you actually have any advice for artists who might be looking to exhibit their work?
Yeah, well, I would say to really plan to really like focus on building a portfolio, to really have a well-written biography, a well-written artist statement. And so start by reading other people's biographies, artist statements, all that. Like look up their CVs online. A lot of artists have their CVs on their website, so you can also
Yeah.
see where they started from, like which galleries did they start exhibiting at when they were just starting out or when they were still students or recently graduated. So you can kind of like follow through that process and don't like, find the most prestigious gallery that you know of and send them your work, because if you have like, you kind of have to build up to certain things. So you can't
Yeah.
like just, like kind of cold call the most prestigious gallery in your area and expect them to be receptive to this. Like that's not how it works. So you have to like really put in the time, put in the work, do all this stuff, and also like be ready for opportunities. Like really get everything ready for when these things start happening for you. So if you don't have a website, well, there are a bunch of free or practically free websites that you can build for yourself. Like just have an online space that is yours, that you curate, if you will, or that like you control and that look professional, and take yourself seriously, because if you don't, then you can't expect other people to take you
Yeah.
seriously either. So I think it's really just kind of like setting everything up so that when you do apply, like you're confident in what you're showing and you don't feel like, oh, well, here's my Instagram, like whatever, I kind of have a few pieces. So,
Yeah.
like have it be more professional than just sending them your Instagram and hoping that they want to like produce an entire show of you, because it's also like being conscious of the fact that for a gallery, like giving you a show is also a risk because they're like
Yeah.
spending time, energy. They have like staff on site. They have like this space that they're lending you, and like all of these other things. So like really just see it from their point of view as well.
That's really good advice. And I especially agree about the website because I feel like, yes, you can have a free website, but you have to remember like this is an investment in yourself. And to be
Hmm.
fair, websites aren't that much money in the grand scheme of the things you like. Your materials are going to cost more than your website, most likely.
Yeah.
And it's an investment in yourself. And I kind of feel like I know a lot of photographers, particularly without websites. And I understand photography is a different ball game, but like if you can afford a camera for a few £1,000s, you can probably afford a
Hmm.
website for a couple £100. Like, and it's not. I say that like not everybody has that kind of money, which I understand, but it's like as you said, if you want to take yourself seriously, like at the end of the
Hmm.
day, if you want to be professional, or at least you want to appear more professional and have better opportunities, then you're right. I highly agree with your advice. Like, present yourself in the best possible way because that way you will catch people's attentions. Nothing.
Exactly. And even if you have self-doubt, like that's fine. And everyone does, and everyone feels like an imposter. And like
Yeah.
maybe right after you send your portfolio, you feel like they're never going to choose me because I don't know what I'm doing. That's fine. But like send it anyway, but present it in a way that looks confident, even if you aren't confident.
Yes. I like your advice a lot. I feel like you need to have a lot of cool sound bites with random piece of advice that you need to give. I think no, I think you do. I think you have a lot of really cool advice to give, which is why I like having these conversations, because people wouldn't hear this if we didn't have this
Mhm.
conversation. So
True.
so
Mhm.
I just want to get into, I guess I really want to touch upon it more than dive into it, because I don't think it's always that necessary, although maybe it is. But let's talk a bit about social media.
Mhm.
Because I think I don't know, I feel like it's a very important part of contemporary art nowadays, particularly in terms of
Yeah.
you being an artist and having to navigate through it. So like the initial
Mhm.
question really is kind of like, what are your thoughts on social media and how does it impact your practice?
Well, I find that a lot of the opportunities that I've had as an artist have happened because of social media. So I really enjoy it for those reasons. But I know, on the other hand, that like it's also really impacted the way that people create work and the way like our relationship to our work as well. Like I think we have to be very conscious about the way that we use it and to know that, for example, it's not sane to want to show a finished work every single day if you don't do like things that lend themselves well to this and to like really understand who you are as an artist and how that fits into social media, I think works a lot better than to trying to just fit whatever you do into what is expected of you or what you feel is expected of you. And I think that you have to also kind of um, you have to also be you have to distance yourself from the expectations of external success through social media, because I find that if you are constantly looking for validation from social media, you're going to constantly be either disappointed or you're going to think that like your best work isn't doing well, so maybe you're going to start doubting what you do. And yeah, so I think it can kind of be unhealthy in that way. So I think if you use it as a tool and you are conscious of it being like just this thing that you use, that's a professional tool, it can be a great thing. But you have to really be careful to not let it take too much space in your art practice in and of itself.
So does knowing that your work is going to be viewed primarily online change the way you create the work?
Not necessarily. Like I know that, for example, the large scale pieces that I've been working on don't necessarily translate well online, or at least not on Instagram with like the square format and like the, like specific sizing and all that. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't translate very well. Like some people who do large scale works make it work very well online, but I don't know, like I haven't been able to do that, and that's okay. Like, because I know that it's more important for me to make work that I'm happy with than it is to like make work that shows very well online. But I definitely feel frustration towards like knowing that what the image that I show doesn't do justice to like the painting that I've made, or
Yeah.
like sometimes it does, but not always. Or for example, like there's this large scale painting that I recently completed for my exhibition that I haven't even posted on Instagram because I haven't found like a satisfactory way of showing it. So it's on my website. It's just not on Instagram yet, but it's like a 6 foot painting and
Wow.
it's not at all a square format. And I didn't feel like photoshopping it into like an artificial environment where like you see it with like designer couches and all that. Like I
Yeah.
didn't want to get into that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's a really good point, because like the way in which your art is presented is going to have a huge impact on the way that your art is perceived. And that's a kind
Mhm.
of a good point, because when you say about designer couches and art, there's a lot of artists that come to mind.
Mhm.
But both, and that's not a good or bad thing, but it's just kind of like, it does make me think sometimes Instagram, especially because that's, kind of like at the moment, at least for now, the main kind of social media. But like the
Mhm.
problem is that images can be very much like dissociated from anything else. People see your images one by one, or they'll see your feed together collectively. And it kind of
Yeah.
makes you wonder, like, how much time do people really spend looking at an image, particularly somebody like you, or like many of artists who their work is very detailed. That it's about something other than just the actual physical aesthetic
Mhm.
image. And it's kind of like I do often wonder, like, how as an artist do you try and get people to stay with your work without embellishing it, without trying to
Mhm.
make people, without doing like a song and dance and making it sparkle or whatever, as opposed to like,
Mhm.
how to keep an audience's eyes on your work, based purely on the work you're creating, as opposed to
Mhm.
anything else.
Well, I think in terms of social media, you have to try to present it in the best way that you can for your art, and then kind of dissociate from how it's perceived or how it's received, because you don't have control over that. Like I can take the best picture of it, I can make the best post about my artwork, but if I either post at the wrong time, or like, whatever other algorithm things happen that your work isn't shown, then you have to not take it personally. And so in the past year, I've been more focused on trying to build my art career locally and on um, exhibiting my work in person instead of just like showing it online. Whereas before that, it was very like Instagram, here's my work, you can see it here, and that's about it. So now I'm worried more about like having a portfolio that I can send to art open calls and stuff like that. So yeah, but I think I need to find a balance between like Instagram and the rest as well, because like I know that I've been really neglecting showing my stuff on social media. But I have people who message me sometimes and are like, oh, I miss seeing your work, or what are you working on? And I find that so sweet that they actually like
Yes.
remember that I exist, still reach out to me and are like, what are you working on? And like genuinely want to know, because especially in a world where you're saturated with a bunch of artists and a bunch of images, like to actually remember that someone exists and to want to know what they're up to,
Oh,
I
yeah.
find that's like such a huge compliment.
Yeah. I think because we forget like there's different sides of the spectrums. We forget that people actually just don't really care,
Hmm.
to be very honest. And then we forget people actually do very much care, and
Yeah.
you're on that sliding scale, like, somebody might see your work tomorrow and love your work and they'll be with your work for like maybe 6 months and then you'll fall off. And then
Hmm.
maybe a year later they'll rediscover it again and be like, oh, remember Crystel, her work is gorgeous. Let's have a look at it again. And
Hmm.
I know that from personal experience of all the people I speak to, and the kind of now I'm thinking about that, it's pretty bad to say, but like kind of the way in which I talk to certain people a lot at certain periods of time, and then I might not speak to them for a few months, and then we'll catch back up again. It's
Yeah,
kind of
and I
like,
think it depends
yeah,
also on like what you're interested in at the time, or kind of the same thing with like different friends, depending on like what you're
yeah,
into at the time. Like
100%.
you'll be closer or a bit less close to some people at times, and it just comes and goes, and just part of the ebb and flow of life.
Of course, and I think it's definitely, especially for me at the minute, it's definitely something I need to remember, because I'm of the opinion that somehow with the limited time I have that I can talk to everybody all the time, and it just
Hmm.
doesn't work. Like it
Hmm.
just doesn't work. Hence my post of the day about potentially having a hiatus from social media and from the Flying Free Bowl, because it's just like you can't talk to everybody at once. It's not
Hmm.
possible.
Yeah, it's
Um,
not sustainable.
it's very much not, and I'm learning that very much the hard way, I think, now. So it's kind of interesting, and it's funny because somebody actually messaged me on Instagram just like 20 minutes ago saying they responded to that story saying, "Are you okay?" And I'm just like, this is a person I've spoken to in March, and I met him in March, and I have not spoken to him that much since. And I'm like, don't know how to respond to that. I'll get back to you later. But I think it's kind of interesting that we forget that you know you have to also take time for yourself as well as creating. Like you can't just
Hmm.
create all the time. You have to also take a break. You have to also live life as well. Like that's some weird
Exactly.
advice I'm
And
giving to everybody nowadays.
yeah, and like living life is what's going to feed your art as well. Because if you're just constantly creating, like what are you creating about, or like what
Yeah,
experiences are feeding what you're creating? Whereas if you're out in the world interacting with people, seeing things, like being part of something, then you're going to have ideas and you're going to have things that you want to express about that. And I think it comes down to like having a balance of creative time, alone time, and time with others where you're like doing things
yeah,
and experiencing things, and also time where you're doing research, readings, and whatever
yeah.
else like feeds your specific practice as well.
Yeah, because I feel like there has to be a balance between you have to create work and then you have to market the work you've created. You can't just keep creating all the time, because
Hmm.
yes, it's cool to always be creating. It's good to always be in that zone of wanting to create work and being motivated. But
Hmm.
like you can very much easily end up with a studio full of work that will never sell because you haven't marketed it, but you're still creating more work. Like
True.
there is a point in time which you have to stop and actually kind of take stock of what you've done and be like, okay, cool, what can I do with this now?
Hmm. And I think that comes down to also like what do you want in terms of an art career, if any, because if you just do art because it feels right and because you need to make art and you don't want to do it as a career, that's completely fine as well. Like I know an artist who I really admire who has a full-time job that he does, but he's an incredible artist and he knows that he could probably make a living off of it, but he doesn't want to because he doesn't want to have to make those like decisions or do those things that he would have
Yeah,
to do in order for it to be like a career or like
yeah,
for it to be monetized. And I really respect that because I think a lot of people try to go the opposite route where they're like, well, I've been painting for 6 months, it's time to make it my career, and it's like, well,
yeah,
no,
yeah.
it doesn't have to be
No,
your career, and you can just do it for fun, and that's perfectly fine as well. And you can still show your work even if it's just for fun and it doesn't have to be monetized or.
I 100% stand by that. I really respect that opinion because I kind of feel like, and maybe this is just me because I did post as a question ages ago and people were like very much the opposite. But I feel like there's a huge stigma around artists that do art part time. I feel like
Hmm.
people are like, oh, you're not a proper artist if you do it part time, where I completely disagree. I think the fact you create art, for the most part, makes you an artist. And I feel like,
Hmm.
so what if you have a part time job or if you have a day job or if you're creating art on the side, you're still an artist. Just because
Yeah.
you're not making all of your income from art doesn't mean that you're less of an artist than somebody that is, in my
Hmm.
opinion. People might think differently, but I kind of feel like there needs to be like I agree with what you're saying. Like I think there needs to be less of a stigma around it, and people need to also realize that like there's nothing wrong with having a full-time job or a part-time job and doing art on the side. And even if you want to
Hmm.
make that into a career or a side hustle, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, true. But it also comes with it's a lot of problems that you don't
Yeah.
have if you're just doing it
Yes.
like while you also have a job, because like having that financial stability or having some sort of like stability or even just having something else that you identify as or that you do with a good portion of your time takes a lot of pressure away from your art making in and of
Yeah.
itself. Like uh if you're just identifying as an artist and you have to make a living off of it, I think your relationship to your art is going to be different and you have to find a
Yeah.
way at first to like handle that because it can easily be overwhelming and it can get to be like too much or like paralyzing even.
Yeah, because you're restrained to having to make art all day, every day. And if you don't make
Hmm.
art all day, every day, then your finances are going to suffer. And if your finances are going to
Hmm.
suffer, the quality of life is going to suffer. And if that suffers, your mental health might suffer. And then, it kind of cascades down and down and down. Whereas in like, if you have like a different job or if you work, even if you like do volunteer work or whatever, that takes you out of your art and you have time to
Hmm.
think and kind of reflect upon what you're doing. And then you get back into it and kind of with a different mindset and a different set of eyes. Like so I think I would 100% agree with that. I think it's actually quite important to remember to take a break away from doing art all the time. Even if you're working, even if you're a full-time artist, I feel like as you said earlier, like you need time where you go and take a walk, where you go and see friends, where you go and be
Hmm.
social, where you go and just kind of recharge your batteries, go on a holiday, take a break. Because creating is great, but you can very much burn yourself out just by constantly working. Like there's as I'm thinking today to myself this morning, like there's a fine line between working hard and overworking and you have to really
Exactly.
toe that line.
Hmm. And I think it's easy to burn out creatively if you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself or if it's like the thing that is bringing in your income, because there's just I don't know, there's just like so much more expectation or so much more pressure from
Yeah,
it. And if it's something that you do like evenings and weekends after your job, then it's something that you're going to do like for fun and that's going to be relaxing for you. And you have to hang on to that when it transitions into being your career, if it does at all.
absolutely. Like absolutely.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of really curious actually. So what kind of feedback do you get on your work? And also what feedback do you like to give?
The kind of feedback that I get, well, during my exhibition, for example, I got to speak with a lot of people who came by, and I think people are generally very positive in the feedback that they give. So there was very little like critique
Yeah,
or like constructive stuff, but also I think I would expect that more in a like work in progress stage of my work. Whereas if
yeah,
I'm, in the gallery showing my work, then I think, I'm saying like, well, this is finished and this is where it's at currently. So I think people feel less, um, welcome to give like more critique, which is fine because I think also like at that point where I was showing my work in the gallery, I was like, I've worked so hard on this and like I feel kind of brain dead from like those couple of weeks where I was just painting and just in the
yeah.
studio. So I'll take the compliments like anytime. It's good. um,
100%.
yeah, but before that stage, I do like to get more constructive feedback or like I would like people to tell me if they think something isn't working or if something is overworked or if something just, you know, whatever like constructive kind of thing that they can have about it. Um, so that's the kind of feedback that I enjoy getting. I think my friends that aren't in the art world will mostly tell me like they like it or they don't like it or things more along that line. So it won't necessarily be like, oh, you can fix this part of the composition or like whatever technical thing isn't working, which is fine too. The thing I do not enjoy is when people tell me you should paint this. Or
Um,
I've had a lot of that, like especially in the beginning where I was still, just trying a lot of stuff. And I had a lot of friends who were super supportive, but who were like, you should paint whatever subject, and they would like tell me whatever their opinion was of what my art career should be. And it came from a place of them wanting me to succeed, so it was very sweet. But it's also very confusing when like from everyone around you, you hear like you should paint this, you should paint that, you should stop painting this. This sells, this works, and you're like, well, I'm still just figuring it out for myself. So I don't want to hear like what you think will sell well and what you think I should be painting, because that's not the sort of thing that I enjoy.
Absolutely, but that's also interesting because that's from somebody who doesn't necessarily know the art industry. And just because
Hmm.
from the outside they think it will sell well, doesn't mean that it will sell well, you know?
True. And even if it does, that doesn't mean that I want to cater to that,
Yes,
like. Mhm.
absolutely. Because you're creating art for a more deeper purpose than just selling work. Like obviously being paid for your art is a goal, but it's not the
Hmm.
only goal, The art.
Exactly.
And I think people who don't necessarily partake in art or have any kind of consideration towards it don't necessarily understand that because
True.
I think every artist will understand that. But I don't think people who are artists do understand that
Hmm.
because I think a lot of people, the general public, as they like to say, they're very much black and white about art. You either make money off it or you don't. And it's kind of
Hmm.
like it's actually there's so many different shades of grey in between. That actually you don't have, as you said earlier, you don't have to make money off it, and you can
Yeah.
just enjoy it for the sake of doing it. Whether it's time or not. If you don't want to watch Netflix and you want to create a piece of art, nothing wrong with that. You know.
Hmm. True. And also, I think that, like for me personally and for a lot of other professional artists that I know, a lot of their revenue isn't just from selling their work, it's also from either teaching or from artist grants or from artist
Yeah.
residencies. So there's that whole like aspect of your career that is independent from actual art sales. So it's okay to make things that don't sell and that aren't like necessarily popular or that don't like catch on, because sometimes you have to paint something or you have to create something that is important to you or that like has a meaning, but it isn't necessarily aesthetically pleasing or that someone's not going to want above their couch.
Yeah.
And that's okay too, because you have to just create those things that you want to create and feel like you're independent from like the commodification of your art itself. And yeah, so I think sometimes it's important to do things just for the sake of doing them and without thinking about if they sell or not. And I think yeah, like if you're really seeing it from like a bigger perspective of like this is your career and this is what you want to do, then you have to seek out other avenues as well.
Yeah, I think the idea of like passive income, for instance, for artists, is a good way of thinking about it. Things like
Hmm.
workshops, things like teach classes, things like, licensing your work, for instance, things that
Hmm.
people don't necessarily automatically assume that people are doing when they look at an artist selling like originals for thousands of pounds. Like
Yeah.
that's a really good consideration. That's actually a really good piece of advice for any artist listening. And the idea of like, think about how else you can sell your work without actually selling your work directly. Because there are
Hmm.
plenty of other opportunities and other avenues open to you that you might not have thought about that could actually be potentially more beneficial. Or it can
True.
just put some money in the bank here and there as you go along that could really help you.
Hmm. Oh, and one of the things that I wanted to mention earlier, you asked about advice for other artists, and I
Yeah.
forgot to mention this, but one of the things that was kind of a game changer for me was to start making prints of my work. Because before it was like, well, you have this one physical painting and
Yes.
you sell it, and that's it. You've sold your painting, and that's it. But if you're making, in my case, I do limited edition prints of some of my work, and so you create an edition of whatever size you want. So for example, like I'll do a limited edition of 15 prints of one specific painting in one size, and I number them, I sign them, and once they're sold, they're sold. But like it still gives you the opportunity to have prints that you can sell from the same artwork that you've already sold. But it also keeps it affordable because not everyone can
Yeah.
afford an original, regardless of the price that you choose to sell it at. It's still, prints keep it more affordable, more accessible, and it also means that more people can have access to your work and have it in their homes and enjoy it in a different way. And I think that like keeping it accessible is important for me. So prints were definitely a game changer, and it also meant that like I could start making more money off of my
Yeah.
art. Even like like artists hate talking about money in general and like hate talking about like that aspect of it, and it feels like we're selling out, but like we really should stop having that
Oh,
relationship to
yeah.
money where like we feel like it's a bad thing. Like if you can do what you love and people want it in their homes and they buy it, like that's just the best of both worlds, and it doesn't have to be a bad thing.
Yeah, because I was going to say, like, your prints actually are very affordable. And I think
Mhm.
that's really one of the great things is that not only is the quality of your work great, but you're selling it at a price in which both you're comfortable with, but also that is approachable, affordable, and accessible for people. Because it's like,
Mhm.
there are definitely a few artists I've spoken to who have said to me like, "Oh, I don't want everybody to buy my art. I want only people with, a certain income to buy it, or I only cater to kind of people, kind of like high upper echelon, or like they have like, fair enough, they have like a standard for who wants to purchase their work, but
Hmm.
at the same time, I also always think that the more you can disseminate your work, the more people will get to see it, the more people will get to enjoy it, the more people will be intrigued and talk about it.
Hmm.
I have a good,
True.
I have a good friend, Ryan Dean House, who sells really affordable prints, and he's told me that a lot of people see his work in other people's houses and inquire.
Hmm.
And it's like word of mouth is the best way to get recognition for your work. So it
Absolutely.
can work out really well in your favor. So
Hmm. And just in terms of someone who like hasn't always had a lot of money to buy art and who still wanted to either support an artist or just have some of their work in my house, like I found that prints were a great way to do that.
yeah.
And it doesn't have to be something that only like the super rich can afford to do. And like I think art is something that speaks or has a potential to speak to everyone. And so it should have the potential to, be in the lives of most
Oh,
people.
oh, 100%. Like the prints I have four prints here, and none of them were particularly expensive. Not because
Hmm.
I don't want to spend a lot of money, but just because I don't have that much money and I don't have the space. And it's like I
Hmm.
would love to have a huge original painting on my wall. That'd be amazing. But like I don't have a house, I rent, so it's just not feasible. And I think
Yeah.
if you think about it in terms of like actually maybe your audience are people with not a lot of disposable income, or they're not going to be they're not, they don't have thousands of pounds to spend on a new piece. I think it's all
Hmm.
about knowing your audience as well, or kind of figuring out your audience as well.
True. Yeah. And I know that like um the big art market, if you will, of like collectors who have
Yeah.
a lot of money, like I think a lot of them view it as an investment as well, or like as a way of not paying
Mm,
taxes. And
mm,
so, perhaps the person who's buying your print for $20 or whatever it is going to appreciate it more than the person who buys your art in order to store it in order to sell it for more money in a
yeah.
couple of years. So
Yeah. Because
uh
yeah,
mhm.
because there's to me personally, there's nothing more sad than somebody purchasing a really famous artist's work and they're just hiding it away.
Yeah.
Like because art is always created for the world to see for the most
Hmm.
part, and I feel like I guess that gets into the kind of whole commodification of art and kind of making money off it and investing. And it's not a bad idea. It's something that I would love to toy with in the future. But at the same time, it's also like art's not made just to be shut away in a warehouse somewhere so that it gains more value in a few years' time. It's made to be experienced. And I kind of feel like
Hmm.
you're right. I can definitely attest to like the prints I have, I see every day and I love them because
Hmm.
they're really cool and they're people I speak to, which is perfect, which is why I want to buy a
Yeah.
piece of your work,
Hmm.
and it's nice for me because when I see them, I think about the conversations I've had with people. It's
Hmm.
like, I don't know, there's an interesting connection, I think, with people who appreciate your work in different ways, you know. I don't know.
Hmm.
That's very interesting. That's actually a very interesting consideration in terms of like the different appreciations of your work and the different kind of tiers, I guess, of customers,
Hmm.
if you're looking at it
Yeah.
financially. It's interesting actually.
And that's not to say that someone with a lot of means will not appreciate it either. Like
Oh,
I'm
of
making it
course.
sound like it's, exclusive to one or the other, but obviously that's not the case. It just depends on like, who the people are and what they're actually looking for with the art.
Of course. It's like, in my opinion, it's like photo books. It's like, photo books are an investment. You will spend 50 to £100 to £200 on a thick book, and it's like an investment, but it's not for everybody. A print is much more affordable. So it's just like, it's about giving people options,
Hmm.
and also opening your audience so that everyone feels like they can access your work and kind of,
Hmm.
you know, yeah, I don't know. But then again, it's down to you as an artist to figure out like if that's something you want to do, or if you want to cater to a more kind of limited audience, I guess.
Yeah.
So let's transition into the outro section. So the kind of first outro question I have for you it's like, it's actually really about the oversaturation of art. So like, do you ever worry about the oversaturation of the art industry? And does it ever make you consider that, your work is just going to get lost in the mix of constant art?
Um, I think that in terms of like online viewing and consuming of art, it definitely feels oversaturated. But yeah, like I think when I'm creating, I don't think about that necessarily. I'm just trying to get to something that is personally meaningful. And I find that, if you get to a place with your art practice where it's like it really speaks to you and it has a potential to speak to others, it doesn't matter how many other people are out there creating art because if it's something sincere and powerful, it will always have its place. And so I think for me, it's just important to find exactly where I'm going with my practice and to get there and to get to something that I'm proud of and to, kind of stop caring about the rest of it. Even if there are a lot of other artists, and even if, there are a lot of other people who are interested in the landscape and all that, like no one's going to have exactly the same thing to say as me, and no one's going to do it in exactly the same manner. So even if there are a lot of artists, it doesn't matter. And it's just, I'm glad that there are other people who find pleasure in art, and I'm glad that there are other people doing it. And if anything, it's just going to kind of amplify the interest that we have towards art.
Yeah, that's a really great perspective, like a really great perspective of that. Because I feel like it can sometimes be overwhelming and potentially quite negative. It can kind of quite ruin you. It's a question, actually, that I didn't include on this list, but a cool photography friend of mine called JJ Brandon, who's an incredible photographer, we were talking a while ago about the danger of looking at so much art and how that can impact your own work. And like, do you ever feel like looking at so much art on a day-to-day basis kind of negatively or positively, impacts the way in which you create your own work or value your own work?
I think it can if you're very focused on looking at other things and um, kind of either emulating things or just sometimes stumbling upon something that has already been created that you've been thinking about doing. Like that's the frustrating part I find of like looking
Mm.
at a lot of art online through Instagram, for example, is sometimes I have an idea and I think like, oh, it's a great thing and I'm going to do it and it's going to look somewhat like this, and you start like planning it, and then you're scrolling along and you come across something and you're like, oh, this is what I wanted to do, but it's like so much better than I thought that that it was in my brain. And so I think that's the part of it that like I find to be a negative experience, because sometimes those ideas I will not do them because I feel like if it's already been done, or I feel like it would be copying if I've already seen it now. Whereas like I
Yeah.
know that there's nothing that's or it's hard or like practically impossible to be completely original now, considering like how much has been done and just like the vast amount of art that is out there. But like if you know that something is out there and that like you've seen it and it's already done, like I think that's when it gets to be like it's too much because it's already been done.
So do you think that anyone could be an artist?
Yeah, definitely. Like I think like in different ways we all have specific aptitudes, or we all have our like levels of how naturally interested we are in certain things. But I think it comes down to just being interested and curious, because there's like we no longer need to have things that look a certain way, or like we've kind of dissociated like the quote unquote quality from like the intention and the message of the art. So I think if you have something to express and you feel strongly about it, absolutely just make art and make art about that, and don't worry about like perfecting anything, and just focus on the message and on the thing that you want to make and just do it. And like being an artist doesn't mean that you have to make it a profession either. So I think if you just have like interest in creating art and you don't want to go through like the trouble of making it your profession, then just make art anyway and it's fine.
So in your opinion, what does it mean to be a successful artist?
Well, for me, being a successful artist would be creating art that I am personally satisfied with and happy about. So that would be like the ultimate goal. And afterwards, like how that's received is going to be a whole other thing. And I hope that, what I get to in the end is going to speak to other people, and it's going to eventually be like outwardly successful as well. But I think the most important part for me is really to just find exactly what I want to do with it, and to do that, and to get to a point where I don't have the fear of like making bad art, or I don't have like these things blocking me from creating, because sometimes I still feel like there's that fear that comes into like the creative process of like not being able to do exactly what I want, or like the fear of making a bad painting and then that can sometimes stop you from doing things. But yeah, so I think that's like the main part of it. But like I think in terms of outwardly successful, that's really just going to depend on every individual and what exactly they want to do with it.
And how do you measure the success of your own work?
um from my own work, I would say it's how I feel about it and how close I was able to get to what I intended to do with it. Or if I didn't get to what I intended to do with it, is it better, or is it, like going in a different direction that I wasn't expecting but that I'm happy with? I think that would be how I would measure if I'm successful with it.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's a really
Mhm.
good way of looking at it, because I think it's nice that you're not necessarily so caught up with the monetary value of your work and making
Mhm.
people like you or like, you're not after popularity. You're
Hmm.
not after fame. You're after creating an experience and having conversation and engaging people and, just kind of, you know, showing your, as I always say to everybody, like showing kind of like the your inner mind through,
Hmm.
like as I always say, like art is kind of making the internal external, like your inner thoughts outward. And I think
Hmm.
that's a good thing. That's a great thing. I think that's kind of what art should aim to do, in my opinion. Um,
Exactly, because it's like the one thing in your life where you can just do whatever you feel like doing in whatever way you feel is appropriate and just doing it, So you shouldn't have to worry about like how it's eventually received because it's that one place where you have that freedom to just express whatever you want.
but do you think that with like social media guidelines, that creative freedom exists?
Um, Probably not as much as it should, because I mean it all social media are private companies and they get to dictate their terms of service and they get to decide if they ban you or they get to decide whatever they want. So I think if your work is more in the like not safe for work area, then you
Yeah,
kind of feel unsafe on these platforms. But with this sort of things that I'm interested in, that's not something that I worry about.
yeah, of course.
But like I definitely understand how that could hinder the creative process of some people who will like toe that line a little bit more, who like are a bit either edgier or who work with more like political or more like nudity or with the human form and who have to worry about like will they get banned, will their account be shut down, and especially if that becomes their livelihood, like that can have a huge impact. And I assume that will have
Of
an
course.
impact on how they create.
Yeah, because I just think it's very interesting that, the notion of artistic freedom and creative freedom and that, the fact that like as an artist you can do whatever you want. But I also kind of feel like you can do whatever you want within limitations because it's like, you have to think about, not just kind of like reactions from audience, for instance, but also like,
Hmm.
you know, community guidelines and, maybe somebody might be offended by a piece of work, somebody might not like something or they might, anyone can report your account as much as it sounds cynical, like anyone can report your account for the most silliest of things and and kind of really destroy years of hard work. And it happens quite often. So, look
That's
at something
true.
like Beautiful Bazaar magazine. Not that long ago, the account got taken down, and it's like that's a staple of community of the art community. And it's like if it can happen to an account that's like that big, it can happen to anybody. You know?
Hmm. True. But also, I think you still have that creative freedom no matter what
Yeah.
like all of those exterior things entail. You can create whatever you want, and then you can choose whether or not you want to show it there, and if you want to show it at all, or where you want to show it actually. So those are also things that you can think about. But um, yeah, like I think, or I hope anyway, that there's going to be a better platform that is more is more tolerant to different points of view, or that is less worried about like optics, and where people can express things without having to worry about eventually getting banned from it.
So I have a question for you from the last artist I interviewed. I actually didn't send you this question. It was completely by mistake. So the last artist I interviewed was a really great artist called Trills, who creates, he's a neo-figurative, neo-expressionist artist. He uses like colored pencils to create these really interesting, complex images that kind of denote towards the technological society and the way in which we kind of communicate with one another. His work is really, really fascinating, and he's becoming like a really good friend really quickly.
Hmm.
Somebody I very much respect, appreciate, and value. It's just super lovely. And it's always nice for me to get to meet people and to get to communicate with people, and kind of it just seemed very genuine, which is great.
Hmm.
So his question for you is, what is your favorite part of your career?
Of my career or of
Yes,
like art making?
of your of it could be art making or like art career, I
Okay.
guess.
Hmm. Um, well, I guess the favorite part so far has been having my solo exhibition and really having that experience of being able to having just my work on the walls in a like professional setting and having people um, that I know from my life or people that I don't know like coming to the exhibition and just getting to see them interact with the work or just getting to hear their questions about it or their comments and just getting to chat with them in that environment. I think that's been my favorite thing so far, like just being able to have this event, and being present for it and having that.
That's absolutely, that's such a great answer. And also it's such a great accomplishment as well. And I want to just say once again, like, congratulations on that, because it's not an
Thank
easy
you.
feat. And I feel like it's so important to congratulate artists when they have these great things happen to them. Because,
Hmm.
as I said to you at the top, I think, we kind of just like assume it's a natural thing for artists to have gallery shows, but just because you have, just because you create art doesn't mean you'll get a gallery show. And I think it's kind of
Hmm.
like, I hope and I wish that more people just congratulated artists, because to be honest, it's
Hmm.
exciting. Because now it's like, who knows where your career is going to take you? Because you have that
True.
representation under your belt. And it's like, it's something to put on your CV. It's something to show that, you are, not that you weren't before, but like now you're a serious artist. So,
Hmm.
congratulations. I'm actually really excited to see where you go next, because I know you have a great work ethic. So I'm very,
Thank you
very
very
excited to see where
much.
you go. Because every
And
time
I
I
think
talk to you, you're like, I'm working on this and I'm working on that. And I'm like,
it's
what?
nice.
So do you have a question for the next artist I interview?
Um, yeah, I think I would ask them if they couldn't make art anymore, what they would do. Like what would they would do with their lives or with their free time, or just what would they do if they couldn't create art anymore?
Would you like to answer your own question?
Ooh, sure. Um, I think, yeah, I think if I couldn't make art anymore, I think I would get into like small scale permaculture, agriculture.
Wow.
That's something I'm super interested in, and I think you'll definitely see that kind of intersect into my
Yeah.
painting in the next year as I move to the country and start growing a bunch of veggies and become like super intense about that. But yeah, I think that would be something that I would do and that I would feel very fulfilled with. Because I mean, if I couldn't make art and I just had like whatever kind of job, I would still stay alive, but I wouldn't, be thriving. But I think if I was able to do that, then I would still feel like I had a great life.
So, in your opinion, what makes a good piece of art?
Hmm. It's such a complex thing. Like, I think it's if you're able to make a piece of art that's more than the sum of its parts, I think that's what makes a good art piece because, you can have a lot of like really good things happening in the artwork, in terms of like the more like technical things, like everything that I've mentioned, like composition
Yeah.
and all that stuff. Like if it's good, it'll automatically kind of draw you to it. But I think it has to be more than just that. I think it has to be able to like hit certain emotional strings or to speak to something more than more than just what it is. I think it has to be more complex than just like the actual art piece itself.
So the second part of that question, so double barrel question,
Mhm.
is so what was the last image or piece of media that captivated you? And what was it about it that left an impression on you?
Oh man, I don't actually remember the name of the artist, but I saw someone who did a very large scale painting of like the of a detail of a forest, if you will. So there was just a lot happening in terms of like foliage and all this stuff, and just so much attention to like every little part of it. But it also worked as a whole as well. So I think that's the last one that comes to mind because I saw it earlier today, but I don't remember the name of the artist. No, I'll look it up and send you her name, but I can't remember right now.
Yes, please do. I'm super interested. And actually, that gives
Hmm.
me an idea of something else to add to this list. So, do you feel that being an artist, is it isolating or liberating or both?
Probably a bit of both because definitely liberating in terms of like how I can structure my life and like the things that I can do with it. Maybe limiting a little bit more in that I don't feel like a lot of people really relate to it when I tell them like I'm an artist. When I'm just meeting people for the
Yeah,
first time and they're like, "What do you do with your life?" Well, I'm a painter. And I don't I think they have like this very romantic version of what it is
yeah,
that I do, so they don't like understand the work that goes into it. They're like, "Oh, that must be so easy. You just like get up, you paint a little bit, and then you go about your day." And they think it's like this other sort of existence. But yeah, so I think maybe just like not having that understanding of like what it is that I do can be a little bit more isolating. But I think like just having an art community, as we were mentioning, can kind of offset that part of being an artist. But yeah, definitely more liberating than isolating.
that's great. That's absolutely great to hear. So it should, I think it should be that way, shouldn't it, end today? Because
Hmm.
you're creating to express yourself at the end of the day. And I think that's can only be good things come from that.
Hmm.
So, what was your younger self think about your work?
About my work itself, I don't know, but I know that she would be absolutely thrilled that I'm making art and that I can actually do this for a living, and that I can actually just, explore that. Because when I was a teenager, I was very interested in art, but I felt like, well, I had the idea at the time that like you were either born talented as an artist or you weren't, and there wasn't like this understanding that it's actually just about, well, not just about, but like there's a big part of it is actually about practicing and putting in the time and like learning and doing like very focused learning on what you were interested in. So I think I got discouraged because I wasn't at a level that I wanted to be when I was a teenager, and I just kind of stopped art entirely, even though that's the thing that I was the most interested in and the most passionate about, and like, and could talk about forever. But yeah, so I think I would just be thrilled that I'm actually making art and that I can actually do that now. And yeah, that would be the main thing.
So that's actually really beautiful because it kind of like it just shows that you're meant to do it because you've always been inclined to do it, and the fact that you
Hmm.
actually can do it, and it's possible. I think we hear a lot of doom and gloom, like, oh, you're going to be an artist, you're going to starve, and it's like, well, there is that side of it. There's, let's not lie, but there is also a huge
Hmm.
possibility that you can make it. It depends on the amount of work you're going to put into it. At the end of the day, you're,
Exactly.
you're going to get out what you're putting. That's life at the end of the day.
Hmm. And like for all the bad things we said about social media, it is also what allows me to be able to do this
Oh, yeah,
professionally.
100%.
So like I think a lot of like for example, when I was a teenager and my parents knew that I was interested in art, they did everything they could to discourage me from becoming an artist because they like had this idea that I would like, never be able to make a living off of it, that I would like starve and just, be miserable. And so of course they wanted the best for me, so they didn't want that life of like misery and starvation, which I totally understand, but like I think the reality since then has changed completely where like you can promote your stuff yourself online, you can market yourself online, you don't have to become a gallery artist in order to make a living off of your art. So I think that's changed the reality quite a bit. And yeah, I think it's great that people can now like do this professionally, and that there's so many like new professions that didn't used to exist that do now, and
Yeah,
that are quite interesting.
that's very true. That's very true. And then the last question for you, much to your happiness, I imagine, is what are you currently working on, and where can people find more about you and your work?
So I'll start with the where.
Yeah, yeah, perfect.
So there's my website, crystelpereira.com, where people can see where they can see my work. Otherwise, there's my Instagram, Crystel_Pereira, which I will probably link to
Yeah,
the
I'll have a link.
podcast
Yeah,
somewhere. Okay.
I'll have a link. Yeah, I'll have a link in the show notes. Yeah,
Okay. So I think those are the best places to see my work. Obviously on my website I can get more into like writing and
yeah.
showing like larger photos of what I do, so that would probably be the best. And what I'm currently working on now, as I mentioned a bit earlier, I got a grant. So the grant allows me to just do research and creation for a little over 6 months. So it's just basically like 6 months of painting in the studio and
Wow.
doing a like creating a body of work with the themes that I'm really interested in at the moment, which are just how do we talk about the climate crisis in contemporary landscape painting. So I'm trying to find a way to do that through painting. And so yeah, hopefully, well actually by the time this comes out, I'll be towards like the end tail of that series of paintings. So I'll have like stuff that I'll already have shown online, I imagine. But yeah, I'm very excited to keep working on that and to keep trying to develop that like those ideas through painting and find a way to actually make that work and not just be like a super depressing series of paintings or like just beautiful paintings. So
Yeah,
like where do we draw the line, or like how do we toe that line?
that's amazing. And I actually probably should have mentioned at the start, which I always say I'm going to do in every episode and never do in any episode, that we're
Hmm.
actually recording this in mid to late August.
Hmm.
Because I always forget to actually say when I'm recording, because I forget people don't may not realize I schedule everything about 3 months in advance, roughly
Yeah.
like 3 to 4 months. At this point, it's going to probably end up being 5 or 6 soon. But it's like I forget, and I'm like, maybe I should mention that at the start. I need to start doing that, but we'll see. But yes,
Yeah.
so we're recording this in mid to late August. So yes, so by the time this comes out in like November, yes, people
Hmm.
can go and see this work that you're talking about now.
Hmm. Yeah, there will at least be some teasers online about like,
Yes,
because the series won't be done end of November, but there will at least be some things out online at that point.
that is absolutely perfect. Crystal, thank you
Hmm.
honestly so much for your time.
Oh, thanks to you as well. I'm really happy to talk to you and to get to know you a little bit more and all that.
That's perfect. Thank you. Like, I really appreciate your time and just the conversation and just your authenticity. Like, I appreciate that so much. That concludes the last and final part of my conversation with Crystel Pereira. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions or comments about it, please send me a message at flyingthroughball@gmail.com or get in touch via social media sites such as Instagram and Twitter. The Flying Through Ball podcast can be found on a variety of sites such as Spotify, Apple Music, or YouTube. If you like the show, please consider rating, reviewing, sharing, or subscribing on any of those platforms to help us spread the word. Also, please think about checking out theflyingthroughball.co.uk for daily art inspiration. And if you're a creative, please get in touch for a chance to be featured or interviewed. Also, we now have a Patreon page if you're interested in supporting the platform further. Tiers start from £1, and for more information about rewards, please head on over to patreon.com/theflyingthroughball. Additionally, we also have a PayPal if monthly donations are not your thing. I shall leave a link to our PayPal in our show notes. Once again, thank you very much for listening to this episode today. Until next time, folks, please stay safe.